Hey, YouTube, this is Teach MA Dude coming to you with an amazing opportunity I had here to interview a real practicing teacher and get some insights about what it's like to teach on the front lines from a perspective that is not in Massachusetts, but hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about kind of how what we're hearing today relates to what it might be like to be a teacher in Massachusetts. Today we have Louis Labrie, a Virginia teacher. He's a middle school teacher. He teaches robotics, technology, and design, and even had a little bit of experience to do some curriculum design. So really excited to have you here, Louis. Welcome aboard. Thanks for coming on the channel.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Awesome. So first question that I have for you, what made you decide to become a teacher? What got you into it? What got you excited about it?
Really, I kind of got into it by accident. So I was a tech company CEO for a while, and right around March of 2020, kind of had that big announcement like we're shutting everything down. My overseas investors kind of just dried up, and I decided to look for something new. My wife, who is also an educator, wanted to try to help me out with that. And she said, "Hey, you have experience with robotics, design, stuff like that. My school's hiring. Why don't you just apply?" So I applied. I had zero experience with kids. Um, I had no experience teaching other than some basic stuff like teaching my friends different things, stuff like that. Completely different. They put me in this training program that helps people in industry get into teaching. So basically teaching them classroom management and lesson planning and things like that. And then I just kind of never looked back. It's been 3 years now. So
Well, congratulations. That sounds really awesome. Like parlaying your skills in industry into a teaching career. How do you feel that your training program really set you up for success as a practicing teacher?
honestly, I think that there's no amount of training that prepares you for what teachers go through. It was kind of actually a real shock going from the classroom to actually being in front of 20 to 30 middle schoolers, right? So you kind of get this deer in headlights look. You don't know what you're doing. You know the kids are a lot wilder than you expect. The training was great. Obviously, it helped me figure out how I need to plan my lessons and make them more engaging and things like that. But I mean, you can probably speak to this, but for me, there was no amount of training that was going to prepare me for the real teaching experience.
Yeah, totally. And I had about like a year of a teacher training program myself, and I definitely agree with you, right? So, it seems like you had like maybe like a couple months in the program, but you
Right.
could definitely, I agree, you could train for a month, you could train for a year, but I agree with you. It feels like you do pick up like a lot of it on the job, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and especially I can't imagine, given the times you were going through, that also must have been kind of a challenge as well. So that's awesome. So when you think about teaching, and I know you teach at the middle school, I'm a high school teacher myself. What are the kind of strengths and the challenges that you see when you work with kids in your kind of at your level and in the kind of subjects that you teach?
Robotics is a difficult subject. I mean, I think that kids are very interested in it because they think robots, it's fun, it's hands on. They're not thinking about the complexity of what it actually is, the coding, the hard work, the design, things like that. When I first went into it, I kind of thought, these kids are going to eat this stuff up immediately. They're going to be excited. It just wasn't the case at first. I think that when the reality set in that it wasn't just playing with Legos or playing with robots, that they had to design things and that there was math involved, they got a little discouraged. I kind of had to redo how I was presenting the material to them. But once that happened, they really loved it. It was great. They had a lot of energy. That age group, huge amount of energy. They just don't stop. So that's a bonus for me because they just want to soak up knowledge, which is great. It's also kind of a complication because, me being 35, I'm exhausted by the time they're just starting to get going.
Yeah, relatable, relatable. And we're about the same age, so I definitely can feel that exhaustion sometimes. And I almost wonder like what do my older colleagues who have families and all that, how do they balance all of that? It's crazy with all the kind of commitments that you have on kind of a day-to-day basis. That's awesome. I appreciate that. When you think about, looking back and, we have a lot of teachers, I talk to and like I interface with who are either considering pursuing a career or they're in an educator prep program or maybe getting ready to embark on their first year as they go into the next school year in September. What kind of advice would you give them, or even if you could look back and give you advice as you entered your career, what would you say?
Well, I think there's two main things I would suggest. So, one is make sure you're patient, right? I thought I was a patient person before I walked into teaching. I found that I wasn't as patient as I thought. Now, 3 years later, I'm way more patient now, almost by necessity. But I'd say, bring your patience. That's the number one. And then the other thing for me, which I've heard other people say this, but it really is true, that be the person that you needed when you were that age, right? Like be the teacher that you needed someone to be for you when you were that age. I was I'm not going to say bad kid. I was a wild kid, a rambunctious kid, a little bit of a troublemaker. And I just tried to think about, what kind of teacher would I have had to change that? Like, what kind of teacher did I need to make me focused and excited about learning and things like that? So I would just say, and because that's different for everybody, if you're getting into teaching, figure out what you needed and try to be that for the kids, because someone out, you're not going to reach all of them, but there's someone or a group of kids that you'll reach.
I think that's really good advice. That's really good advice. And I love how you kind of like again like you parlay your own life experiences and have that really strong sense of empathy where you look into yourself and you think about yourself as a student and you try to kind of reflect that into your teaching practice. That's amazing.
Yeah, right. We
So,
were all just kids once. So,
right. Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. So, I know like, watching videos, right, and reading through the Reddits, one of the big things you definitely see as a common thing is people talking about they're working with administration and kind of some of the trials and the tribulations that come with that. In your experience, and I think you're coming from Virginia, I'm in Massachusetts, so it might be a little bit different and in some ways the same. What for you has it been like working with administration, and what kind of notable challenges, if any, have you encountered?
I mean, administration's kind of one of those things that either makes or breaks you. I found that out like really in the first 2 years of teaching because we have changed administration 3 years in a row. Okay, so my first year, loved my administrators. They were amazing. I felt supported when we had parental issues or teacher issues. I felt supported. And it was during 2020, it was during the pandemic. So there was a lot of issues. There was technology issues, there were mental health issues with the kids and with the parents and even with us. But I always felt supported. The next year, new administration, new set of problems. Didn't feel supported. Um, didn't feel like they had my back with teachers or parents when it came to like remediation or things like that. Completely different ball game. Actually, that was the year that I started to think, wow, maybe teaching's not for me. And that's from one year to the next. So 1 year, good administrators, or good for me at least, and loved it. Next year, not so great administrators, made me not love it. So I think that they are the game changer. They're the make it or break it, right? Good ones make great teachers, bad ones make bad teachers.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. I totally agree. And in my experience, it definitely can make a big difference because kind of everything trickles down from there. And I've read that it can even, studies say it can even take like 7 years for an administrator to truly hit their stride. And
Wow.
I don't know if that's true, but if that's true, wow, that could, yeah, take some time. That's for some people, that's their whole teaching career, like as long as they
Right.
stay in it. So we'll
I
have
mean,
to
7
see.
years is a long time.
Yeah, yeah, it is for sure, for sure. It's almost as long as I've been teaching, or actually, I've been teaching a little longer than that, but it's a good amount for sure.
Yeah.
That's really awesome for sure. So I guess kind of along that same vein, right? So we got the administrators. It's kind of part of the circle of support that we get into to support that real what I call the triangle of accountability. You also on that topic, a key piece of that is being able to work with the parents, the guardians, the caretakers. And so kind of what has your experiences been when it comes to working with, those important stakeholders, and what kind of challenges or what kind of great stories, bad stories, anything have you kind of encountered along
Right.
the way?
Well, it's kind of strange. I've seen a weird shift just in the 3 years I've been there. 2020, very supportive parents. I think that they just were scared for their children because, the at home learning aspect, everything was unknown. I got a lot of support from them with the behavior and things like that. As it's progressed up until now, I've seen a huge shift from supportive to combative. So I'm not sure where that's come from or if that's an experience people are seeing in other states or other, areas in the country. But for me, I've just seen a huge shift where parents just don't want to see their kids as needing improvement or having behavioral issues. And like I said, it's the same thing with the administrator. You have great ones and you have not so great ones. I'm not going to say bad because everybody's just trying to do what they can do. But I've definitely had parents make situations worse. Um, Now, going back to the pandemic, right? We have this whole new pandemic of kids that are behind due to remote learning and things like that. Now, the supportive, educated, sometimes not educated, but the supportive parents have kids that are not behind, they're actually excelling. So I feel like the new pandemic is just this huge gap between the kids that had supportive parents that were learning at home, were progressing in their studies, and those who didn't and are falling behind. So I feel like the average is still there. It's just there's a larger gap between the top percentage and the lower percentage.
Yeah, that's that standard deviation, so to speak, is definitely
Yeah,
widening for sure. And in Massachusetts, it can be tough. I don't, I think what it seems like we've experienced has been, relatively consistent. But I think that getting at that idea that, while our mean, so to speak, is relatively high, we also have a big standard deviation. So it's almost like, yes, we're seeing success, but like at what cost? And how do we
right,
make sure that everyone is we're always going to have people who are doing well. We're always going to have people who are doing not so well. But how do we kind of bring that in and try to help and support as many kids as we can? I really
right,
appreciate your empathy there too, because I know, everyone went through a whole lot during that time. And it took a big hit on all of us. So, kind of along those lines, and I know you said you got into teaching around 2020. So, I don't know, I don't think you might have been in the education field before the pandemic, during and after, but kind of to the best of your ability, like in your mind, how do you feel that education has been impacted by the pandemic?
yeah. Like you said, I can't really speak to the past. I started right in the midst of the pandemic, so I can only kind of echo what the other teachers, the veteran teachers that have, supported me through this 3 years have told me, and that's that there's been a huge shift in education, that the standards have been lowered, um, the behavior has gotten worse, and I don't think that that's on the kids or any one group. I think it's uh, systemic problem. Everybody, I mean, I spoke about this in one of my YouTube videos that everybody wants an easy life, right? We all want easy lives. So if there's a flaw in the system that you can manipulate to get an easier life, you're going to do it, right? And I think that's just what the kids are doing. They're finding those gaps in our system where they can say certain things and make their lives easier. They can do certain things and make their lives easier. And I think that's the biggest shift I've seen and heard from other teachers about. And I'm not sure if that's due to, them trying to take, like, the system trying to take it easy on kids. It was a hard time. We did almost need to lower our standards because we didn't know what it was, unknown territory, right? But how do we get back to that higher standard? That's my real question. How do we get back to that? So, um, in short, I'd say the standards are what is falling.
And coming from Massachusetts, and having taught before, during, after college, high school, I can say that I definitely agree that in terms of what you're saying about the standards, I think that's super insightful. And I'm sure you probably learned this in your training program. The kids will always rise to the standards we set for them, but they'll always fall if we set those standards and expectations too low. So I think that's a great question. How do you get those standards back up? And I think that folks talk a lot about how do we raise the bar, but then it's like, okay, great, but now we actually have to do it. And so I think that's probably going to be a discussion we'll continue to have, and hopefully things continue to kind of trend in the right direction.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully. So, I think I originally came across your YouTube channel, and I'm definitely going to go ahead and throw a link to that in the description below. But one of the things I noticed is I feel like at this point you're ready to kind of move on from teaching, and you're ready for what comes next. What has kind of made you decide, it's time to move on, it's time to try the next thing in my life?
I think that being a lifetime teacher takes a certain kind of person, almost selfless. And I know myself, and I am not a selfless person. Okay, I enjoy living life to its fullest. I love the kids. I want them to have a great future, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my time and my life to try to fix a broken system. Um, one big thing that irked me and made me kind of fall out of love with teaching and want to get past um, teaching was that my wife, who was a trained professional, who has a master's degree from Spain, she came to the country and can't teach without having to go back to school. Mm-hmm. So, that whole system of allowing someone like me, which I'm not saying I was a bad teacher or it was a bad call, but I'm not a teacher by training. My wife is, but somehow they're able to make an exception for me to teach and not for her. Mm. And we complain about not having qualified teachers. So there's just this disconnect there between what's being said and said that's needing to be done to fix the system and what is actually being done. So that's another reason I'm leaving. My wife and I have actually made the decision to move back to Spain. She's going to be teaching there. I'm not sure what I'll do there. Probably a little bit of this and that. I tend to fall into things pretty easy, so we'll see.
Wow, that sounds awesome. I've always wondered what it'd be like to live in another country. So that sounds amazing. Yeah, I mean, it is really too bad. Like you said, there's certainly a teacher shortage, and to hear that, like, Virginia wouldn't accept someone with a credential in another country when, like you said, I think they could use all hands on deck at that point. That's Absolutely. Definitely disappointing. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I'm just saying, absolutely, it's wild.
Right. So, I mean, hopefully at something, again, you can parlay into something good and kind of, make the best of it. So, definitely good to hear. In terms of, like, kind of any closing thoughts, anything you'd want, the viewers to kind of know about that I haven't been able to hit on so far?
Um, I mean, your audience is mainly teachers. Um, I just, want to tell the other teachers out there to hang in there if you can, but don't sacrifice your mental health for it. Um, we there's a certain point where you have to put your foot down and take care of yourself first. You can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself. And then the other thing I want to say is if there's any parents or administrators or anything watching, you know, support your teachers. If you support them, they'll be your biggest champion, right? And, they love your kids, they want them to do their best, but you all have to support each other for it to happen. And that's just not happening right now. So let's try to move that forward, try to support each other and just make things better.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Lewis. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the channel. Again, we're definitely going to go ahead and throw Lewis's, channel down in the description to keep sharing the love and keep kind of spreading the wealth. No matter where life takes you, dude, I wish you all the best. It sounds like you're going somewhere real awesome. And even if teaching hasn't worked out for you now, you never know. Maybe you'll find something in, Spain and make the most of it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming on. This has been another episode of Teach MA Dude. We're here with Lewis. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.